And now it might change. It's 11. I just found the radio over. It's 11% Jewish there. There's a big Jewish population there. The 2 dots of Teku, I believe. So we're about 15 lines from the top at the 2 dots. Just, going to be. So okay, the Gemara. Yosy Omer hatachtoin noichin esatik. So when you have 2 partners in a home, and the floor of the second level falls through, who is responsible for the repair? So the guy in the lower level gives the ticker. Or my ticker. What is a ticker? Dr. Gemara, Rabbi Yosy Bachalina Omer, Hinim Usnoi. Rashi says, Maisa ticker kain machzalois. The floor wasn't plywood in those days. It was some type of mats made out of reeds, woven reeds. It was soft, but afterwards they would put on it a layer of tar, which would, I guess, firm it up. But the guy at the bottom has to give the kinim usnoim. Usatini Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish, and Satini, who was a Shem Chacham, Rashi says, who was a Talmud of Rish Lakish, said in the name of his Rebbe, Levachim. Levachim already are planks. Rashi is flankish. Velaz minisorim shaleres. That's like a proper plywood, proper rigid floor. Below plea, but it's not a machlekes. Mark Yesrei, you mark Yesrei. It all depended on the construction methods in those areas and what they used. It could be where they used planks, people were more overweight, and when they used the mats, people were lighter, so that they were able to hold their weight. Zok Gemara, Hanu Beitrei, Davodari. There were 2 people who lived in the house together, and Chad Eloi v'Chad Tasoi. So exactly this case. And what happened was Ifches Ma'aziva. I guess the tar broke, as Rashi says. Ifches Ma'aziva, V'Tikra Karemes. So the structural, the plywood was there, but the sealant, the shmir wasn't there, so therefore it wasn't waterproof. If the structure is strong, but the sealant isn't there, so it's not dangerous to walk on, but there will be water. If water gets spilled into the floor, it's going to drip down into the floor below. The last circle masker havu. This wasn't a renter and an owner. So what happened? Maya Eloi, when the guy on top was washing his hands and it rained on the floor, or whatever he was pouring water, whenever he poured water on the floor, Asli Umaski Litasoi, it would run down into the lower apartment, and of course, where would it land? It would always land in the electronics compartment of the fridge and fry out the fridge, and then he needed a new fridge. So who is responsible to fix this? The person on top is responsible to seal his floor. The Simon, how could you remember who said Elyon and who's a Tachtoin? It's Rabbi Yosy who said the Tachtoin Misakin because it says for Yosef who had Mitzrayim. So Rabbi Yosy focuses on the lower level. Yeah, but I guess we have to remember that way. That's right. That's what it is. If it's Simon, it's not exactly explicit. You have to think into that. That's right. Okay. So Rashi, Yosef who had Targuma Iskis, Rabbi Bar Yosy Amar Tachtoin. It's funny. Rashi doesn't always explain the Simon, but here because of what Mati's saying, Rashi had to explain the Simon as well. Dr. Gemara, we need to understand what is the Nekudos HaMachlokes. Why does Rabbi Yosy say Tachtoin, and why does Rabbi Bar Abba say Elyon? So Dr. Gemara, Lemer Rabbi Bar Abba, Rabbi Loi, the Plukta, the Rabbi Yosy Rabban Committee. Maybe they're arguing in the Machlokes of Rabbi Yosy and the Rabbanan, and that will also reveal to us what the Machlokes is about. Let's see Rashi. The Plukta, the Rabbi Yosy Rabbanan. the Masnisin of our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? Why is it that Rabbi Yosy said that the person who lives upstairs has to give the maziva, which is like the shmirach that seals the floor? It's kedei shelo yaziku meimav as a tachton. He holds that I'm responsible as the person living on the upper level to make sure that I don't cause damage to the person on the lower level. Why is that? Because he holds a primary responsibility in a situation where you might damage somebody. The primary responsibility to prevent that damage from occurring is the mazik. In this case, the elyon would be the mazik. It's his water that's damaging the appliances on the level below, and therefore it's his responsibility to make sure that it doesn't rain through. And that's why our Mishnah says you take care of the maziva. The takana is to give tikra because he has to provide a floor for me because he's renting me space. But for Tanakama Savar, when it comes to a case of damage, the primary responsibility is the nizik has to protect himself to avoid damage. Therefore, the maziva would also be the responsibility of the tachton because it's your responsibility to prevent being damaged from the mazik. Zok to Gemara. So Elva took the Rebbe Ben completely on the second white line. Leman the Amar Elyon Misakin. According to the man, the Elyon Misakin everything. I'm sorry, Misakin the Maziba, which is Rabbi Yosy. Because some of the Mazik like Katatzman. The Mazik has to avoid the damage. Mandama Tachta Misakin. Because some of the Nizik Lahach Katatzman Mina Mazik. And that same machlokes would carry through in the shower that we had. If the maziva fell off, who's responsible to put it back in again? If you hold on a mazik, that's somebody would be the fellow who lives on top. And if on the nizik, it would be the guy in the bottom. Correct more of Tizbra. Rabbi Yosy v'Rabbanan le'inul l'zaken pligi. Are you telling me that they're arguing on the zaken and the Mishnah? The way to understand our Mishnah is because it's a case of the lower guy getting damaged, and the reason why Rabbi Yosy says that the elyon nation is a maziva is to prevent the tachton from getting damaged. But we actually had another machlokes between Rabbi Yosy and the Chachamim, which seems to indicate that they hold otherwise. It's Rabbi Yosy who holds ala nizik lahachik zatzmoi. So how could you say that pshat in our Mishnah? Why Rabbi Yosy holds that elyon nation is a maziva? Is because I'm going to show you in a different case where Rabbi Yosy clearly holds that it's al hanizik. So that surely cannot be the explanation of our Mishnah. It's not learned. We all know that if you plant a tree right near a bar, the roots of the tree are going to spread out and loosen up the soil in the bar and mess it up. We're more familiar with it when we're digging down near a neighbor. And if you're too close to the neighbor, you have to do something called shoring, right? Otherwise, you're going to mess up his property because his foundation, the earth under his foundation will erode and his house will collapse. So in those days, they had this issue with people having trees near other people's barriers. So the law is if you want to plant a tree, you need to be 50 feet away from your friend's bar. Which happen to be trees that are much stronger and therefore they have much deeper roots. You have to be 100 feet away. If we're on a slope, even if your tree is above the bar on the slope, I'm sorry, 1250 amas. Am is approximately 2 feet. It's basically approximately 2 feet. Or if it's on flat land and the tree is beside the bar, either way you have to maintain the same distance. In my bar kadam, so what happens if you planted a tree and the bar is there before the tree, which means you unlawfully planted that tree? You have a right to cut the tree down because it's damaging the bar. But for nation damam, you still have to pay. I guess the owner of the bar still has to pay the owner for the tree that had to be killed. But in an Elan Kadam, if the Elan was planted first and this genius decided to dig his bore near my ilan, I don't have to. I don't have to cut my tree down. You have to go and make yourself a new bore elsewhere. What if it's self-exact kodam, then leikuts, then you don't cut it down. Rabbi Yosy Omer, af api shabor kodemas leilan, even though the bore was before the ilan, leikuts, you don't have to cut the tree down. Why? Your bore is on your property, and it's none of my business what you do on your property. And I'm planting in my property, and it's none of your business what I'm doing in my property. But you see clearly that I don't have to be concerned about your bore. Even though you have a bore that preceded my tree, I can plant my tree. And I don't have to worry about ala mazik lahaka chazatzmai. I'm a broshet, savar, a Yosy savar, ala nizik lahaka chazatzmai. It's the nizik's problem. It's the nizik's problem to avoid a problem. So therefore, I can plant my tree. I don't have to worry about your bore, and you have to be worried about it. And therefore, the Rabbanan hold that if the bore was there first, you cut the tree down. No questions asked. So you have a clear raya that Rabbi Yosy holds on nizik lahakazatzmai. So that can't possibly be the reason why the elder mentioned this on maziva, because if it's only to avoid damage to the tachton, it should be the tachton that's paying for the maziva. And if you want to say that they're arguing, the plukta Rabbi Yosy Rabbanan the Hasam Kamifaki, you'd have to say we had a discussion of if the maziva opened up. We had a machlekes of Yosy, who pays for it. That machlekes is taka the machlekes about a nizik lahachazatzmai or a mazik lahachazatzmai, but it's not the shaila our Mishnah. So you could say the shaila that we just asked in our Gemara, if the maziva opened up for us to pay for it, will be told in the halacha if nizik lahachazatzmai or a mazik lahachazatzmai, and that will be told in the second brayso that we quoted with the ilah. And in fact, Rabbi Yosy will hold on a nizik lahachazatzmai, so he will hold that the tachton has to fix the hole, and the Tanakama who holds that you can cut the tree down, he'll hold that the Elyon has to fix the hole. But then the question is, what is the shayla in our Mishnah? Our Mishnah we have a machlokes, who pays for the maziva? So that will be a whole different shayla. Rabbi Yosy Rabbanan Dacha is a whole different shayla. But my pligi, b'chozik tikra kamifagi. Rabbanan Tzavi, the Rabbanan hold that the people at the bottom have to pay for the maziva. Why? Because maziva achazuke tikrahu. The maziva, its main purpose is to give more structural support. It makes the structure tighter and stronger. And therefore, who's responsible for the structural to support the second level? The achazuke tikra ala tachtoin very lachzuke. It's the lower level person who has to make sure the structure is sound, and part of a sound structure is putting the maziva on. Why is that? Zot Rashi, the first wide line, the chazuka tikra, of course, we're speaking in the case where there's no issue of water. Because if there's an issue of water, we already said that Rabbi Yosy held on nizik lahachazatzmai. Here the question is, the Elyon is saying we have a problem over here. The Amar, and he says, if I step on the wood, the plywood that you put, it shakes a little bit. It's not structurally sound. When he died, and I'm worried one day, one day I'll be walking on one of the boards and it's going to flip out under me. Or to shamit and I'll fall down. So therefore, he's complaining that it's not structurally sound. That's why the responsibility is on the owner of the lower level to do the maziva to make sure it's structurally sound. That would be the svara. That would be the svara of the Rabbanan, who held the talatachtoin. And the Rabbi Yosy holds maziva ashvuya gumeshu ashvuya gumesh ala elyon la shvuya. And Rabbi Yosy holds the purpose of the maziva is just to make a smoother floor, as Rashi says. The chazuka tikra suddenly be say this sugar and kabbalah plus, just to make sure the floorboards are stable. No other meaning. That would be enough. You want to have a perfectly smooth floor. That's an enhanced product that you're responsible for. on your own. But it's not a question of al nizik lahachas atzmai because there's no case. It's not a shayla damage over here. Fact the more Yomar Bashi ki avidim be'av kahana havamina and Moed Yosy begir delay. Why would you say that over here there's? Why would you say the kasha is going back to the original machlokes? The original machlokes is just if the maziva opened up, who is responsible to fix it? And the Gemara said that according to Rabbi Yosy, it's al nizik lahachas atzmai, and therefore Rabbi Yosy would hold that the guy on the bottom has to fix it. The problem is Rabbi Yosy is more to begir delay. If I'm dropping water and it's falling directly on your refrigerator, that's more than just I'm causing damage and therefore you have to fix it because you're the nizik lahachas atzmai. You're directly damaging somebody. You're directly a mazik. It's almost like other mazik already because you're literally pouring water right on this fridge. So in such a case, it would be the responsibility of the upper level guy to clear that up. But that's not how this happened. In this case, he spilled water on the floor, and it didn't go straight down into his fridge. What happened was he would spill it somewhere else on the second floor, and it would run across the floor, and eventually it would find the hole and drip down. That's not a direct damage. The paskimaya first it falls hard enough, and then it drips down to the main level. And that's what we're talking about. That's what you'll sell in nizik lahachas atzmai. But if the hole was right above the fridge and he would wash himself and the water would go right on the fridge, that already is odam hamaz. Zok Rashi, Eni v'Amar Rashi, as Reb Chiba Yosy Parch. We're going back on what we're saying that Reb Chiba Yosy holds al tachtoin because it's al nizik lahachas atzmai. Damar tachton sakin v'kimlik Reb Yosy. The problem is v'amoid Reb Yosy v'giri delay where you're pouring it directly on. Even though in normal situations, the nizik has to take the precautions to avoid being damaged. That's where it's not adam amazik. That at the time of the planting, we're talking about preventing a future damage. The roots grow, and over time they spread out and they damage the wall of the boma. Here it's like you're literally shooting an arrow at somebody. You're literally pumping water on the head of the lower inhabitant. I'm sorry? There's a hole in the floor. He knows water is going to get right through. Yeah? But Adam doesn't matter if he knows. Adam is mood loyal.
It doesn't matter if it's directly above it or not.
It does matter because if I spill water on the floor, I'm not damaging you. Eventually, that might lead to damage. Under those circumstances, Rabbi Yosy holds it's al nizik lahachas atzmai, but it's not called adam hamas. That's right. The mifter. See, Rashi calls it gramadin azakin. If I'm spilling water elsewhere on the floor, it drains down. Alamazik mamashu. You consider mamash mazik, but adam mud adam or Russian shaykhumezid. You do acknowledge that it's less direct if I'm not pouring it directly in his head, and that less direct is the demarcation point. That's the threshold that has to be passed to make it into adam mazik, and it's not that. Therefore, the alanitik lachach atzmai. It seems from here that the way you separate the two categories are, if the damage happens in such a way where the nizik can prevent it, then the nizik has to prevent it. But if the damage happens in such a way where the nizik cannot prevent it, that's adam hamas. If I'm spilling water on you, you can't prevent it. It happens too fast. But if I spill water on the other part of the floor and it slowly drips down, you have time to protect yourself in the meantime. Well, the other question is, the Gemara here discusses who's responsible to fix it. What if the nizik doesn't fix it? And he got damage from the water. Does that mean the mazik is potter? And if you hold on nizik lahachas atzmai, does that also mean that if the nizik wasn't protecting himself, that the mazik is potter? I'm not sure how it works. I'm assuming that's the way it is, because otherwise, what's the incentive? But the nizik lahachas atzmai, if he can go collect anyway. If he needs a new fridge, let it fry out my fridge. He needs a new fridge anyway. Okay, so to come weiter. Habayis v'aliyah shall shnayim shenafu. We had a bayis v'aliyah shall shnayim. So Rashi says bayis shall zeh v'aliyah shall zeh shechoku kach v'nachlas aviyad. So we've been moving back and forth between the tenant landlords and two partners. So Rashi clarifies that here we're talking about two partners. Omar bal ha'aliyah le'balabayis. The Baal Aliyah wants a new house. The Balabayis is pumping Beirut for the next 12 weeks, or he's Torah late for the next 12 weeks. So he's not in a rush to build. But the Baal Aliyah doesn't have. The Baal Aliyah is here in Toronto by Shabbos Loser. So maybe he needs a house over here. So he said, build up your bias so that I can build my Aliyah on top of your bias. I'm about Aliyah, the Balabayis live nice. He had no right to live nice. And the Baal Abai says, no, I'm not in a rush. I don't want to build now. So what is the recourse for the Baal Aliyah? All right, Baal Aliyah, funny, the Baal Aliyah is the loser, right? Because he's the one who's home for Shabbos Loser. But he's called the Baal Aliyah for some reason. Oh, I know why, because on Shabbos Loser, the losers get Aliyahs. So Baal Aliyah, he gets an Aliyah this week. Oh, it stems perfectly. Mamash the Gemara will have him. All right, Baal Aliyah, Boina, Es Habayis, he gets to build, he builds the house of the lower level, V'don B'Sarka. So he doesn't have to incur the expense of building two houses. He can build one house, and he has right to live in it. Until the Baal Habayis pays the full cost of that construction, and then with that cost, I can then go and build my second one. From Yudamer, no. After right? Lamaisa, you're living in this after he paid you, it's his property. So if it's his property and you finance his property, at the end of the day, you lived in his property rent free. That's not allowed. So you would have to have paid rent for the period of time that you lived in the bias. Rather, what happens is the Baal Aliyah builds the whole house. He has to incur the expense of building both levels. He only puts the waterproofing roof on the upper level. The Yosy bias, and then he doesn't have to live on the second level. He could live on the first level. Unless he's paid in full. Let's hear Rashi explains this. Tosfos argues. He seals up the second level, everything's good to go. But the Yosy goes a tachta. Why? Now, there is no reason for me, the Ben Aliyah, to pay the Baal Habayis for the use of his house during the period that I used it. Because it's I could have lived upstairs. It was ready to go. What are you losing by the fact that I'm living down there? I have it ready to go. And the owner of the bias didn't lose anything by me living there. To have a bundle. It's not ready for you anyway. You didn't build it. I built it. So that's how Rashi lives. Tosfos, I believe, argues. Rashi is v'yoshev the bias achit le'tiyotza Pirish b'kontris the time of Yishum the house of Leib Nehena. As far is now the Baal Aliyah is not having a no from the house. The Aliyah to Mechenes. But Tosfos doesn't like this stuff. Because the Nehena who is having a no. He doesn't have to go up an extra set of stairs. There's a benefit to him to live on the main level. The nearer the Garcinon, Umekar is Aliyah, the Yosy b'Sarka. He actually has to live upstairs, not downstairs. Here's the Aliyah. But all it means is he could lock out the Balabais from living in that house that he refused to pay for until the Balabais pays for it. But about that, he will not live in the Bais because he is having a no, and the Gemara is going to discuss that you have to pay if you have a no. According to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says if you're going to live in the bias, you have to pay rent. But once you pay me my Yetzia, it costs at $500,000 to build a house. Once you pay me my $500,000, I still have to pay you, but I live in your house for 6 months. I have to pay you rent for 6 months.
For those months you
have to pay it all. That's right. So the question is, then Zok the Hela Gemara. Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, the Shleisha Makoma in 3 different places. Shonu Lanu Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda taught us Also, the Adam to Yehenna Mimam and Chaver. Raja Shalei Baratana. If it's a matana, something else. But here, he's doing it unilaterally without permission of the bias. I'm not allowed to have enough from you unless you're very happy. And Tosfos just speaks out. Even though I'm a din, I should be able to have enough from you without paying. The Avagav, the Zen hand of Zeller Chalter. It's in them Chalter. Nevertheless, Zakram Yehuda, Afilochi, Tiknu Chachamim, Shechayiv Loi, Shechayiv Kama, the Ein Loi Lehanois, Mimam and Chaveroi, Shalom Yidait. So that is the kudo there. Zen hand of Zeller Chalter, the Ikar din is going to be put. But the Chachamim Rasakin, it still is not appropriate that you should have Hanoah from your friend without his agreement. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah with Machayev, Tosfos makes it sound like it's a shtickle takon. Because Astal Adam, Shehenu Chaveroi, that's a Rabban. Chadaha, one example is our Mishnah. Hadatnan, Idach, where are the other examples? Mahi, Ditnan. Hanoisin Semel Etzevel is further Adam with Tzavishvach. We had this case many times. The woman was supposed to dye this nice, pristine white wool red, and he dyed it black instead, or Shachar with Tzavishvach. Rabbi Meir Amar Noisin Lo Demei Tzemer. The woman benefits from it. You know what? Because the woman benefits from the shvach. He improved the wool, and he gets to keep it. And he just has to pay only for the raw materials. So Imam is benefited. Instead of him having to run around and shop for raw materials, the raw materials were delivered to his doorstep. He improved it, and he gets it all. So he's benefiting from somebody else. If you don't know, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. If it was improved by $20, but it only cost someone $10, the balabais benefits from that shvach. He only has to pay the $10, and he benefits from the $10 of the shvach. They might say it's still a shvach. If it's only with $10 more, but it costs $20 to get that benefit, then only knows the shvach. What's the sver? So Rashi says the sver is no, Rashi doesn't say very, but the sver is Rabbi Yehuda holds that I don't have a right to benefit from your work, and therefore I get the raw end of this, the raw end of the deal. What's the third option? The knan. Mishapor mixes chayver. A malva and loiver. The chayver for $100,000, and the loiver has now $50,000 to pay. So the question is, what do you do with the star? If I keep the star, if the malva keeps the star, what stops him from collecting the full $100,000? But he can't give it to the labor because the labor says I don't have to pay anymore. So what they did was the hishlish story. They gave it to a third party. They put it into escrow. And the deal was that the labor made was I don't pay you by a certain date, by July 31st. Then story, I allow the shlish to give it back to the malva, and now he can collect the full amount from me again. So that's a very strong incentive for me to pay up on time. What happens if he gives malva nothing? What happens if in fact July 31st arrived and I didn't pay in full? So the halacha is Rabbi Yosy Yitin. Rabbi Yosy says you give it to the malva. You give it to the malva, and the labor is not going to have to pay an extra $50,000. You don't know lo yitain. So what's the sver of lo yitain? Again, why should the malva benefit from the labor for no reason? So again, it will be at the kollel. Why not? He made a deal. But the kollel says that you shouldn't benefit from somebody else without his doubt. So these are the three examples. All of these three examples are not necessarily examples of a special takana that you shouldn't have enough from somebody without his das. There might be reasons for it other than that. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Yehuda said over here that I have to pay is because it's not zen hen v'zelech chaser, it's zen hen v'zelech chaser. Because when you're living, everybody wants to move into a brand new pristine apartment. You're making my apartment used. The walls get blackened. You know what it means. You're in the house. This gets damaged. That gets damaged. I'm not going to get a pristine apartment, so I'm actually losing. That's why Rabbi Yehuda's machayev me to pay. Imami, in the case of the further Adam v'tovei shacher, you shouldn't become a shana. It's not a knas. It's not because I can't have enough from another person. It's a knas because you made a deal and you reneged on your agreement. It's not call him a shana. Call him a shana. So Rashi says it's going to be a knas. The knas the colorlessly, as Rashi says. But then maybe there wouldn't be a takana you have to pay. And in the case of a Misha Par Mixus Chayvei, Nami, have asmach do v'shmina Rabbi Yehuda lekani. Maybe the reason why you don't give it back to the Malva the star is not because we don't want the Malva to have enough on the road. It's simply because Rabbi Yehuda asmach do lekani. I would have never said that you can have the star back had I thought I wouldn't pay. I'm sorry? That's exactly what the deal was. If I don't pay, no, I borrowed 100,000. I paid you back 50, right? Now what do we do with the star? So we take the star, we give it to Tuvi. And I tell Tuvi, if I don't pay him in full by July 1st or July 31st, give him back the star and he can collect the whole amount. The deal was I'm making myself to pay off the $100,000 because it's as an incentive to make me pay through. Rabbi Yehuda holds you don't do it. So why don't you do it? We made a deal. The deal was a deal. I was mechanic myself. So the Havamina was because you shouldn't have enough for me for no reason. That's what the Gemara is. The Gemara is no, maybe I was machalekan. That I was mechayiv myself that he should give you the shtar, but in the event that I don't pay me, that's not correct. It's not binding because it's in the smach. A smachta means that when I said something, I never thought that would happen. So I really never meant to allow it to happen. We had a choices about it. When you say smachta kanya, if it's in my control, if it's not in my control, if it's very likely, if it's very unlikely. But I'll maybe I'll read out in this case that structurally there's no kinyan here. So the reason why he can't give me back the star is not because of the knats because of Xavier, it's because my commitment was never binding. So therefore you don't have this whole right. What happens if we're rebuilding the project? Well, the owner saw in Home Depot a new building material that was cheaper, and he wanted to use a different type of building material on the lower level. So the general gist of the next half of Omud are going to be very simple. Anything that the guy on the bottom wants to do to make the construction stronger and sturdier, he's allowed to do. Anything that he wants to do that will make it weaker, he's not allowed to do because that will limit how much the alien can build on top of it. On the flip side, the alien, anything he wants to do to make it the weight of his structure lighter, he's allowed to do. And anything that he wants to do that will make it heavier, he's not allowed to do. And that's going to be explanation for the whole block of it. If the Tachton wants to use Gvil, he called Gvil as a type of material that's stronger. If it was originally from Avnei Gozis, and he wanted to make it into Gvil, you believe it, you let him do it. Why? Because Gvil is wider, it's a wider type of stone, it's sturdier, it's stronger, and therefore it could support more weight. For sure, we let him do that. But the great, if he wants to downgrade the strength and the rigidity of the building materials, ain't Shayman. The Kafizin Shayman, these are half a brick. So there are two ways to build a wall. You can build a wall with one solid brick that was, let's say, 3 tefachim deep, and then you would have a wall of 3 tefachim. Or you could take that brick, cut it in half, and you would put these two half of bricks a half a tefach apart, and you would fill the center with cement. So now you had a 4 tefach wall because you created a space. So again, it's stronger and sturdier because it's wider. Well, the kfizin because it makes the wall into 4 tefachim instead of 3 tefachim. But the levanim, if it was originally kfizin and he wants to downgrade the levanim, ain't shayman. L'sachak v'arozim shayman loy. He wants to use arozim which are very strong and sturdy. He's allowed to. The shkamim ain't shayman loy because that's not as strong. L'may pechalod is shayman loy. If he wants to make less windows, he's allowed to because a window weakens the structure. It's not solid brick. L'habed pechalod is shayman loy. L'adbia ain't shayman loy. If he wants to make his property, if he wants to make his apartment taller, you don't let it because 2 reasons. Rashi says, A, the taller a wall is, the less rigid it is, and the other thing is now the Ben Aliyah has to walk up more steps to get to his new apartment. Lamayit, but if he wants to make it lower shayman, Elyon Shabbat Rishanis Begazis. What about the opposite? The Elyon wants to use smaller bricks, shayman because it lightens up the weight on the lower level. The Gvil ain't shayman, the Kfizin ain't shayman, the Levanim shayman. My Rozim ain't shayman, the Shikma shayman, the Rabbis Becharoni shayman, the Mat Becharoni ain't shayman, the Rabbiya ain't shayman, the Mai shayman. It's exactly the opposite of the previous case, except for Rabbiya. Because Lagbia, if he makes his level higher, it also adds weight. So that's the only place where they have the same halal. But what would happen if ein loy lezeh v'loy lezeh? What if nobody has enough money to rebuild? So neither one has money to rebuild. So Rashi, now I'm on the third wide line. Ein loy lezeh v'loy lezeh livneis shalnimin. They're both poor. Uvalakarka right to limkar akarka. And the person who owns the karka wants to sell the karka. We're assuming that the owner of the karka is the owner who owns the buy. So the owner of the main level wants to sell the karka. Does the Ben Aliyah have any rights to it? Because now he's going to lose his apartment, or maybe he doesn't own any karka at all. Tanya of Nasanheimer, Tachton notel shnei chalakim. The Tachton gets 2/3 of the karka, but the Elyon who had rights to have his apartment there, which he's now losing, he will be entitled to 1/3 of the karka. The Achrein are in Tachton and Shloshah chalakim. The Elyon he only gets a quarter. So that's how Rashi learns. Tosfos does not like Rashi's pshat. So let's look at Rashi. Zok Rashi, Pirush HaKuntris. I don't like Rashi's pshat to Pirush HaBalabayis right to Limkos HaKarka. The that wouldn't be a shaila. The pshita of Ein Yachal Meichai. How in the world could the Balakarka sell the property? I have a right to build my apartment there. You have no right to sell. You're contracted to me. I own a chelik of this because I'm entitled to build there. So therefore, it would absolutely not be allowed. This is not a relevant shaila. We went to Limkar Karka. Lases Habayis, the Ein Merchak Ala Koyach Sheyesh Lo B'Saycha, and if you're telling me that I'm selling the property, but whoever I'm selling it to will also have to build a bias on it and give me the right to build a second level on top of it. I have the right to sell my interest in this property as long as your interest remains intact. So what is the shayla over here? Why shouldn't the person who owns the lower level sell whatever rights he has, and that is to rebuild the bias, but the Ben Aliyah still has a right to build on top of it. So that's not the shayla. Because Rashi says I have a right to sell and you don't get anything. I will merely read the Marish right to Balabayis Lezera. The Balabayis said I'm not interested in using this anymore to build property on. I actually want to farm this field. Uvalaliya Amar, okay, I'll be willing to relinquish my right to build here, but only if I have a share in what grows in this field. Gamaniya is there. I also want to benefit from the planting. Shigamaliya Karka Mishubit Laliyah. Because I also have chelik in the karka because it's mishubit to me to be able to build my apartment. So how much, assuming that I agree to use this field to plant in, how much am I entitled to? Maybe you get nothing at all. So the Gemara said, in fact, that the Ben Aliyah is entitled to either a third or a quarter of what ends up growing in this field. So Omer Rabba, in the Kait Rab Nosson Yadach, you should always accept Rab Nosson's psak as the final psak, who says that the Elyon gets 1/3. You know why? The Dayanahu, he was a dayin mumcha, he was known to be a big dayin, and because of that, he thoroughly analyzes a situation to make sure that he has exactly the facts and exactly the details so that he can paskin properly. I would paskin like Rab Nosson. Kasavar, kama mabsir aliyah the bias. How much does the aliyah lose? Tilfa. He loses a third. Tilfa. There's a third. What do you mean? How much does he lose? Dr. Rashi, first of all, the runner Rab Nosson is an abbez in hoya. The meaning the hoya is prepared pastor. Come off the shlish. You make kiyuma. Imimaheres lipo machmos maso aliyah. Where does the third come from? If you build a single-story house, it might last for 120 years. But if you put on it an aliyah now, there's so much more weight on your structure, it's only going to last 90 years. So, or actually, it's only going to last 80 years. So you've lost 1/3 of the life, the longevity of this house. So that's where Rab Nosson got it from, that when I own an aliyah, I actually own 1/3 of what's going on over there, because that's exactly what the Balabayis is doing. He's letting me reduce his lifespan of his house by 1/3 and that's why I'm entitled to a third of the property.
Order.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where what his psak is based on. Is it because he holds that the house lasts longer? It can't really be a machlokes Metzia. Yeah. You don't look at that factor. But Rabbi likes Reb Nelson's analysis. Zok Gemara.
Otherwise, we don't have why one holds the third, one holds the quarter.
Well, we have an explanation of Reb Nelson, right? That's the Gemara gave us. I don't have an explanation of the other shita, right? The Nelson shita we have an explanation of. Rabbi helped us with it. The other shita we don't have an explanation of. Okay, it's a cherem. We don't have the parish of that cherem. What the 25% is based on. Now, in those days, they would build houses, and the structures were usually arches, right? You go to the old city of Yerushalayim, you see everything's an arch, and on top of the arch, they can plant more. So you imagine someone had a base about on the side of a hill. So if he had a roof or an arch over his base abad, over his oil press, technically that area, that flat area on top of the dome, can just be contingent with the higher level of property as you go up the hill, and you have an extra 10 feet or 20 feet of flat land to plant on. So that's what happened over here. Two brothers split a property. One got the base abad, and one got the flat land above it that he could plant on. So the base abad, it was built into a mountain on a slope. So above, on the roof of the base abad, you could cultivate, and it would just extend into the rest of the slope. Vegina achas al gabo, and there was a garden to be planted on the roof of the oil press, the nifchas, and now the roof broke. So, and the Baal Haba does not want to fix the roof. He has a right to plant on the floor of the base of that. Until the lower guy builds another arch. In other words, it's not a house anymore where you're talking about beams. The construction here is an arch, so the Baal Hazayis would have to put up a new arch. Someone had a wall or a tree that fell into Rosh Hashanah. And they damaged people in Rosh Hashanah. Potter milashalim. They're potter from pain. What if Bezin came along? The municipality saw that this wall was in danger of falling. This tree was in danger of falling. And they said you have 30 days to cut this down or to take down the wall because it's a menace to society. On the list as a koisel. They didn't remove him on time. They didn't remove him, but they didn't by the time. It fell after 15 days. Potter. If it's after the days that they were charged with removing those menaces, then they're chai. What if my wall was near your garden? The Nefal and my wall fell over into your garden. And the owner of the garden told me, Pal, you mind getting a company in and getting rid of the bricks? All your bricks and your debris are on my property, get rid of it. And the owner of the wall said, you know what? I let you keep my blocks. You can have him. Rather, you force the owner of the wall to clean it up. What happens if the owner of the gin said, you know what? That's a deal. That's a deal. I'm going to clean up your wall myself, and I'm going to keep all the building material. Then I said, I changed my mind. You know what? I changed my mind. The building materials are worth $50,000. I could have hired somebody for $20,000. Here's $20,000. I want my building materials. Now that you cleaned it up. But tell us, ain't too late. Too late. You already gave him permission to take your blocks. You hired a poil to gather for you tevin or cash, whether it's from your field, whether it's from Hefker, but you're going to pay them to gather. And at the end of the day, the poil says, okay, you said you'll pay me $1,000 for the day. I'm ready for my paycheck. Tell me sorry. And the other says, no, I'm not paying you. You gathered $15,000 worth of straw, keep the straw instead. Even though normally one of the exceptions to that rule is a worker. A worker is entitled to demand you pay him in cash, as Rashi said. Because there's a shalom baltolim, he has a right to demand your payment cash. However, Mishakibullah, what if the worker said, okay, I'll do it. And now he gathers all the tevin, and now he has $15,000 worth of tevin. Then I change your mind. Here's $1,000, I want my tevin. Then ain't shaming about it. Let's just see Rashi, and we'll stop. Rashi says, base abad, base lots of zaysim. It's a place where you pressure zaysim. V'gina achas al gabe, and there was a garden on top. Someone dug into the rock on the lower level, he made like an arch arrangement. He had a garden on top. He maximized the productivity of his land. When he died, not Liban of Zeb Beis Abad v'Zagina. And what happened was the Nifchas Gaga Shal Beis Abad Shehumakim Zurata Shal El. Right? Keeping his arc. I assume arc means like an arch. Okay, but everyone needs to love off of Ezer. So I just have to do structural. The guy on top will put topsoil around and plant there. Why? The soil whose wall fell down. I mean, my wall fell down. It's not my fault. But Nazar is man. So Ra'u Bezin Sharonite. Bezin saw this was a dangerous wall. Ramallah Shasar, they told him to demolish the wall, but never took the list of there. He where he tells the neighbor, keep my rocks. And you can clean it up yourself. And Shaimalai, it means a right. If the neighbor doesn't want, ain't kindly dover half gram matana. He's not going to be kindly dover half gram matana. I don't want it. You have to clean it up yourself. That would be the Shalakalim Shalom and Hefker, Tomash Asisa, Tomash Shalakat the Shalok. You can keep whatever you gathered. And Shaimalai, Zakrashi, here's the point. After the whole dictate Islay. Even though normally whenever I owe you money, I can pay you with anything that I have, even with bottle deposits. My the asni bahadei mashma. Balton schoi means you have to pay him what you made up with him, not some substitute, and you must to pay in cash. Okay, we'll stop here, Bez Hashem, and we'll be mamshach tomorrow. Tomorrow we're closing in very close on the end of the Masech, and maybe we'll leave in Kaparain.
Sorry, just before you stop, there's something wrong with the audio. Can you try another microphone? You've been sounding very muffled the last couple of days. And I think it might be I don't think it's using that microphone. I think it's using the microphone in the camera.